I think the best way when you're building an IP, when you're trying to build a world, when you're trying to build characters, is you have to ask yourself, you step back at the end of the creation process, the brainstorming, whatever it might be, and ask yourself, is this fun?
Hello and welcome to Behind the Game, sponsored by Yoda One. It's the podcast where we talk to experts in the gaming industry. I'm Luke, and Sandy is usually doing the intro, but I'm helping out today. Don't worry, of course, Sandy is here. Today we're talking to Brian Woodruff. He is currently a quest designer at Kabam, working on Marvel's Contest of Champions, and has a lot of experience in marketing for games as well as game design. So Brian, welcome. So I'm curious what the sort of underlying principles are that you need to understand and build on to create, let's say, I don't know, a big world for a new game, or to add stories to an existing game.
I think it's always looking at the fun. And I think that there's this really important element that is sometimes overlooked in the creation of new IP and the creation of games in general. There's this reaching for this reach to connect with people, and I think the best way when you're building an IP, when you're trying to build a world, when you're trying to build characters, is you have to ask yourself, you step back at the end of the creation process, the brainstorming, whatever it might be, and ask yourself, is this fun? And fun obviously is very subjective, and you have to have a lot of opinions on it, and then you build out those opinions on what is fun. But if you're not getting to a point where you can say this is fun and this is going to be fun for other people, then you're missing the whole reality of what entertainment is supposed to be. And like, horror is fun. Is it fun for different reasons? Yes, but it's still fun. I love horror games. We play tons of them, my partner and I, and but I also love like silly games like Mario. And uh, you look at them and you experience them differently, but at the end of the experience, when you put it down, you say, like, was that fun? And then you get into more complex things where you get to, like, I also love the Dark Soul games, and the Elden Ring games where there's a challenge to it, and the challenge becomes fun, and the frustration that you experience with it, to the point where it's about to break you, is also the fun. So in terms of like building characters and building and designing how they're interacting, you have to look at, a lot of people talk about the monomyth and the hero's journey and all that, and I think the reason that people have gravitated so much to that is because it's fundamentally true. And Kurt Vonnegut has a similar practice where, and he has this wonderful video, you can find it almost everywhere, where he goes, you want to write a great story, you make a graph, and you have stories that start where you start at the bottom, and then you have the rising action, the conflict, and then you drop it down, and then you slowly make it go up, and then, oh, you drop it down again. But you're always, as long as you're moving that line, you're finding, you can find the fun. And because those are the moments where characters get to make decisions and players get to make decisions on where they want to go. I mean, you can look at a lot of those, albeit loose, but choose your own adventure type of games where you're given agency over the experience to feel like you're doing things. I do think there is a place for having creatives, writers, and so on use AI and teach an AI NPC how they want them to interact to provide a more personalized experience. But I don't think giving full reign to someone to fire or get rid of an entire division or an entire industry of people is going to solve that. AI, a lot of it is going to come down to both the beginning on why you're asking it to do a certain thing, and also the end of it where you're editing it, or you're going in and you're correcting some of the elements that are not lining up with the human experience. I think you can see a lot of
It's a curation process.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that curation part is the thing that's fundamentally human, because humans are the ones who are going to respond to it. And so there's something there where, as the creator curator, you're syncing with the player, the viewer, the reader, whatever it is. There's a human to human connection there. And then there may be many tools in the middle, AI tools or otherwise. But those are all just sort of implementations.
Is anyone here familiar with the short story "I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream"?
No,
Mm-mm.
I don't think
Uh,
so.
I may have actually even missaid it, but there's this author who wrote this story about actually AI and so on, many years ago, quite a long time ago, and they wanted to make a video game out of it, and they sought him out, and he agreed to be part of the. He agreed to help write it, and again, this is a person who wrote the story that is about AI get rid of almost all of humans. I think the story centers around 5 or 6 humans that remain, and the AI is experimenting on them in horrible ways. But the reason I bring up the story, and specific to the game industry, is they made this video game, but he refused, or maybe he was incapable. I like to think refuse is a more fun way of looking at it. To use a computer to write the material, he used a typewriter. He wrote all of the content that ended up being then transcribed into the game on a typewriter. And this is a science fiction writer. So I think there's a lot of this. It's about the tools, right? He was a person who existed in the speculative fiction realm. He understood what video games were. He accepted being part of this video game experience, but he wasn't using the tools that were best suited for making for connecting him directly with the experience. So someone then had to transcribe it. And I think that comes back to the kind of curation component where you assume it must have been 1-to-1, but frankly, I don't know if he ever played the game. So did someone make some decisions when they're doing the transcribing, or were there typos they fixed? Did that take away from the experience? Probably not. But yeah, I think the human component is just the most relevant one, and the more you're able to show people that that is something that is going on when games are being made and inside the games themselves, then you get this full experience. I mean, we were talking with some unfortunate in the last week. We were talking about Helldivers 2 last week, and I was saying how I love their marketing their marketing campaign up until some of the recent stuff that's happened, and obviously Sony's kind of wheeled back on that. Uh, they created this in canon marketing campaign where the way they were engaging with their player base was as if the experience was real, and I read this whole thing about players reporting a unit that was in the game that they hadn't announced in any of their feeds, and when players were saying they spotted this new enemy in the game, the response from the marketing side was like, "This is propaganda. This is enemy propaganda." And I like again that is just word of mouth. I haven't played the game. I've watched some videos on it. I think it looks great. I think that a lot of the components of it make sense, but that's that human element. That human
Yep.
element is just such a fun one.
It
And I
evokes
think that
something in the gut, definitely, when you hear that there's something unpredictable and unsanctioned is going on. It does make you, it gets you curious, at least. Maybe Sandy can speak more to this, but yeah, it's interesting.
So I've been super into Fallout lore because obviously the TV show, right? Like, and it was so good. I don't know if you've watched it, but I was super into it. But now I'm spending hours and hours and hours like watching game footage and like looking into all the vaults and like looking at all of these old, or I guess they're not old, but they're like experiments, and like humans basically. Like these vaults are like social experiments, and I just find that so fascinating. And you were talking about players being able to choose how they want to play the game, and Fallout is that in itself. You can choose to kill people, or you can choose to like be nice and things like that. And I think that was maybe one of the first games that kind of did this, but I don't know. I've been super into Fallout recently because of all that human connection and looking into the different experiments.
oh, I completely agree. I mean, I watched it with Leslie, and she had played a little bit of Fallout 4, but I think it was probably because it was around the time our son was born, and she kind of just uh, she veered off. Anecdotally, if you want to hear about, I think this might be a fun story because this is my anecdotes. It's subjective, but uh, so Leslie and I, again, we've been together going on 16 years. But when we met, she wasn't into video games at all. And video games were a part of my life. I don't think they were overly consuming, but I've always really enjoyed them. And in our life, what we did after our first year, we met in Montreal, and then we moved to Japan, and we were there for a few years, and then eventually we went to China, and then we went to Victoria. And when we got to Victoria, and we've been together for about, I'd say, 4 and so on years, maybe almost 5 years at that point, we were. I was always trying to get her into the video games, but and she's like, occasionally she loves the Super Nintendo, she loves the Nintendo games, but she had this psychological hurdle that she was not prepared to get herself over, where she looked at the modern remotes with the 2 joysticks, and she's like, how, why?
Too
And
many buttons?
I think it
Well,
was
you have to
really,
move one, and then like I
yeah,
understand. I'm a keyboard
Okay.
player because it just makes way more sense to my brain. Like
yeah.
the controller, I just don't know. I just can't do it. We were at GDC, and we were like, Isma and I were walking around like testing games, and he was like, I was like playing one. He was like, Sandy, I thought you were a gamer. Like, why are you so bad? And I was like, that's because I'm on controller. I'm a keyboard player.
Oh, I completely get it. But we were in Victoria. We were walking around, and there was a game store that we spotted. And she's like, "You know what? You've been bugging me about this, but you know what? I'm going to prove to you that I don't actually like these type of video games, modern video games. I'm going to try some, and I'm going to give it my all. But I'm going to pick them." So she walked in the store, and she was wandering around, and it's judge a game by its cover time in this moment. She walks over, and she picks up 2 games. No influence of me. She picks up BioShock,
Oh
and
my gosh, I love Bioshock.
she picks up Red Dead Redemption,
Okay,
and we bought them, and we went home. And this also plays into another comment about having story mode available for players, because I think
okay,
that is something that was so important. Being able to give the easier mode where you still get the experience, but you don't need to be stressed about it. So she
right.
put in BioShock, and
Bioshock is scary.
I was like, oh well, I guess this is it. Like she's gonna play this game, and she's gonna be like, well, I told you you didn't like it, but the exact opposite thing happened. And
Wow.
with it, she beat it in a weekend, and it was the first real game she played with two joysticks, and she just went right through it. Loved it for the story, for the creepiness. Then she put in Red Dead Redemption, and to this day, she says, and she's obviously played the second one. She said Red Dead Redemption, Bioshock as the gateway game, and then Red Dead Redemption is what convinced her about modern video games and narratives, and the fact that video games have all this value that she didn't understand when she was growing up. And part of that has to definitely do with marketing and how they market it to men and women, boys and girls, and so on and so forth. But she now plays video games independently. She loves video games now. I talked with Ken Levine for a couple hours in a chat similar to this, and told him that story, and I was like, oh, I wanted to let you know that because of you, Leslie, now you've converted a gamer who is in proactive denial that they would like video games, and he was happy to hear that, but also I saw on his face like this wasn't a unique story, that other people had also told him this.
I'm curious, what are the things that are behind that, right? So it's almost like, you know, clicking on a YouTube video, the thumbnail is the cover, but then it brings you deeper and deeper. So there's these pieces that are kind of woven together. One brings you in, one keeps you, right? I'm curious the things that sit under that, right? What are the sort of the operating mechanics that draw players into, whether that's the the icon for a game on mobile, or the thing that prevents them from churning, right? What are those things?
I think there are elements that you have to believe or appreciate as being random. I think that there is the fact that cloning a game that works and reskinning it and having similar art styles to a game that is successful speaks to people's desire to see commonality and see something that feels like they can. They're like, oh, I've seen this game before. There's nothing wrong with that, really, but it does come back to the. I used to do a lot of marketing, and I've always said marketing and video games have share a lot in common, and it comes down to psychology and data.
Could you explain that a little more? I'm just curious. Yeah, because I don't think people, I don't, at least haven't thought about it that way. I don't know,
Hmm.
Sandy, if you do as a marketer. Sandy,
Everything's
actually,
about
can I maybe
psychology.
let me ask Sandy first. I'm just curious. Do you, Sandy, when you're doing marketing for games, are you thinking that way? Like, I'm talking to players, and this is not a disconnected activity from the game.
Oh yeah, of course. And you have to, I mean, it also goes along with branding. And so you have to also think who you're talking to, whether it's, a 12-year-old or a 35-year-old, how you're going to talk to those people are different. So yeah, I mean, you have to think about how people are going to receive your message. And if you want them to complete an action, let's say that you want them to play this new event in the game, like how you get them to do that is, all psychology based.
When you're designing a concept in a game, I think that you have that same type of you have to approach it the same way. You have to say what has worked in the past, and how can I either improve upon it, or does it need to be improved upon? And then you get a lot of feedback from early stages and tests and all those fancy game words, vertical slices, and blah 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 blah. But I think I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this about Witcher, because I do love Witcher 3. But I think Witcher 1 is an example of a game that did well because of the world and the lore behind it. But I think Witcher 1 had one of, in my opinion, the most interesting and horrifying uh, gameplay mechanics, where when you start your attack, and I played it on my keyboard, um, you click the attack button, and it starts a swing combo, and then you have to wait for a specific moment within the combo to click again to continue the combo. And if you miss it, you have to start over again. So
That would be so bad.
your the player agency on it, like there's a lot of like, I need to be paying so much additional attention to this to be doing it the way the game intends for me to do it. I appreciated at a experimental level what they were trying to do, but the fact that Witcher 3 does not have that mechanic at all shows that they probably went back and went,
Too much for the average person. Yeah.
yeah, I have to
Yeah.
assume that the data probably supported that. They whether the data is player feedback, or they were looking at other components of it. You get so much interesting information from the background that helps you understand how you can be planning forward. And sometimes what you think is going to happen or want to happen isn't what happens, but that's fine as long as you're willing to accept and to adapt to what you're finding out. I think experimentation is super important. I mean, way back when I was doing SEO and SEM marketing, there's this not even urban legend. It was a reality, but it was there was an ad that was lime green, the limiest of greens. That when you saw it on your screen, you were like, ah, what? But the people who were running it had eventually released a case study showing how much clicks they got on it, and oh, it makes you almost mad, because you're like, why would anyone touch that? It looked radioactive, but but it caught people's attention.
I mean,
And
it's like all those fake ads, right? Like fake ads make me so irrationally angry, but they are a thing for a reason. They work, so.
So it's a filtration
sponsored.
mechanism. It's filtering out the Sandies and getting to a certain person who likes that, right? Or who the liveliest screen people that you want to get. That's a way of separating out people and getting a certain type of player potentially, I would assume, right?
Hey, I'm still talking about it.
Yeah, you're still
Like,
talking about it. Yeah.
like
How,
I become part of the problem. I become part of the great conversation of like, do you remember a time when there were lime green ads that roamed the internet backgrounds?
yeah,
You're
I
making
actually,
it live on,
yeah, they're the dire wolves of early online marketing. How do you separate the signal from the noise? Speaking of, I mean, you talked about kind of two pillars. You said so. There's a behavioral component for players, and you need to understand that, and then the data. So it sounds like what you're saying is the data is kind of on the backside. Everything that you learn from what players are doing, whether in the marketing stage where they're seeing something and clicking on something, or when they're playing the game and they get frustrated because this combo is too hard. How do you separate the signal from the noise there? What are the things that you need to be paying attention to so that you can learn the things about their psychology that will allow you to make a better Witcher 3? There's going to be a lot of information. How do you know what to look at?
you always have to allow yourself to appreciate what success is and what failure is. Failure is an opportunity to improve. Success once doesn't necessarily mean it's going to always be repeatable, because sometimes when you are building something out, um, and you hit the right mark and you get the right reaction, there can be the mistake of saying we're only going to do it this way. I remember being on a marketing campaign many years ago where the head of the company was adamant that our messaging had to be perfect. They spent weeks upon weeks criticizing, scrutinizing, complaining, providing the type of feedback you see in on internet memes and everything. We're like, I it needs to be jazzed up. It needs to you gotta synergize it, and just throwing out a bunch of words where you're like, that's the noise. That's the noise. In terms of the creation process and the way that I don't think you're ever going to fully be able to filter out the noise entirely, but you have to listen to the voices, the clear voices that are coming through on both the side of where your successes are happening and where your failures are happening. And then you tweak and you find as much as possible that middle ground. And I feel like even as I'm describing this now, I sound a bit like those people who are like, well, I don't like this thing, but this thing is good. Find the middle ground. It's not, it's going to be different for different people, but if you're able to use that and then create a milestone that is repeatable, that has a range that you're able to say, I want between this and this is where I'm feeling success. And I know if it's over here, it's not great. And I need to either go back to the drawing board or fix it or just move on. And if it's way over here, don't use that as this is our new spot. I think sometimes people get to this idea of, there's an adage, perfection is the enemy of progress. And if you're always trying to get perfect, then what is that? You have to define it somehow. And if you're restricting yourself to like perfection is 100%, then isn't like you're never really going to get there. If you
Right.
define your version of perfection of being here, in school, we have a range of what we describe as being successful. 60% is still viewed as a success in school in terms of being a educator or the scholastic system going like, okay, this well enough that we're going to give you more from it. And I think that there's a lot of that in the game industry that that exists in that place. But people, when they're looking at it, they're like, "Oh, they hit 100%." But the reality is, they're probably over here. They probably wanted it to be way better. And then finally, I think it's really paying close attention. We're talking about noise to the voices of your community. Um, there, there is a bit of a problem where, like, often the loudest voices are not is not the
Yeah.
majority of the
Yes.
playership. So don't listen entirely to the person that is being most vocal. But
Right.
if there is consistent chatter that is saying the same thing, then that's worth paying attention to, and engage with them and realize they're human too. If people are giving you money to play your game, if it's a free to play game or it's a paid to own game, uh, just listen. You don't necessarily need to execute on everything that's being requested of you, but if you're not showing that you're prepared to hear people talk, then frankly you're probably in the wrong industry. And
Right.
I think that we've seen that so often where a company is like, well, we're going to make microtransactions the only way you're going to make any real progress here, unless you play for hundreds of hours. And the community's like, what are
Why?
you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? I mean, I really like the game I work on right now. I have my own personal account, and I've got to the top level of the game. I put a lot of time into it, a lot of effort into it, but I haven't spent money on the game. But I completely understand why you can, and I don't feel I never felt playing it that there was a moment where I was like, this thing is forcing me to do this. It is giving me an opportunity to further enjoy this experience in the now. It's giving me the opportunity to get something valuable out of what I'm doing. But I never felt like it's like, you are not going to make progress. We are putting a complete wall in front of you. The only way through this wall is through your wallet. I've never felt that. And I think that there are plenty of games out there that get you to like mid level or even sometimes earlier, and they're like, huh, you're doing well. And
But you
that's
could do
about it.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We give us a couple dollars. I mean,
Give us a couple dollars and then you'll do great.
yeah.
You know? Yeah. But I definitely feel you on the community, and some of the voices that want the most specific things are the loudest, but they don't necessarily, show what your entire player base is thinking. We've run into that several times. Um, we'll ask like, what do you want to see next? And then the biggest players, the most passionate players are answering, but that isn't what everybody else wants to see. So you put out this update and the main player base, is not enjoying the update, but that top 10%, oh, they love it. But, your top 10% doesn't make the whole game. So it definitely is hard to kind of make everybody happy. I don't think that is even possible. You can't make everybody happy. You're going to make someone upset eventually. And a lot of those times, these players don't realize how hard game development is, And so they expect a perfect game, and they get really angry when they see bugs. And, developers never intentionally put a bug into the game, And so I think players also forget that game developers are also people and they make mistakes.
100% agree. 100% agree. And as we were saying earlier, I think that's one of the big reasons having the player engagement feel natural and also valuable. That if someone comes to you and says, "I have found these issues," that you're listening to them, because
Right.
again, I've worked in this industry for long enough, both again in video game design and narrative design, and also just outside of the video game industry and marketing. And I think that there is this. I want to say that there's this attempt to create a division between people,
Yeah.
whether it's for. I mean, it's so many different possible reasons, but the more you're able to say, yeah, come talk to us. Like we're interested in having a conversation, whatever it might be. I mean, I think that is what we're going to see a lot more of. I think unfortunately, going back a little bit onto our AI commentary, that means that a bunch of these companies are probably going to have AI liaisons that are probably going to then be able to do a fairly good job of filtering commentary from the public, and then pulling it out as data. And I think that's probably fine as long as there are those people that are helping assess it.
Looking at the data and then responding to those communities to like
Exactly.
tell them that there is a real person behind this. But I definitely think, I'm going to be honest, we use AI to kind of do that. There's just so many comments and like feedback, like it takes hours and hours and hours and hours for one human to go through it all. So having a AI robot to filter it for me, and I can kind of categorize it to see like, okay, so people are talking about this bug, or like, it does help a lot. But then going in and being like, hey guys, we see that we found this bug, we're working to fix it in the next update, blah, 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 blah. I think, yeah, in that sense, AI is really helpful, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of fear out there for what's happening now in terms of this. And, you feel it, you see it in the writing industry, in the art industry. And I think it's not being talked about as openly in these positive places. I mean, I did a project with a company a couple of years back that had to do with antibiotics, and I didn't know a lot about antibiotics at the time. And then when I learned about antibiotics, I realized how terrifying antibiotic development is, and how niche it is, and the fact that we've only discovered a few antibiotics in the last like 20 some odd years, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I saw an article a month or so ago that was talking about how they used an AI model that has been able to identify a new antibiotic that looks like it's going to be very applicable. But the cost for creating an antibiotic from a pharmaceutical company's perspective ranges anywhere between $5 and $10 billion for one, and they might not even be that the efficacy of it might not even be that high. So we're opening doors to progress, and we're using it in a way that is going to improve our existence rather than interfere with it in a way that is going to take away from our experience. I think there's a lot of value in AI, and I think there could be a lot more articles out there that highlight the good, like even what you just described. I think that type. If I saw that article and I read that article about even in your company, I would be like, this is amazing.
All right. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time, so we always ask one last question to every guest. If you had a time machine and you could go back in time, and you could give yourself a cheat code to like further your, knowledge or your career, so on and so forth, what would your cheat code be?
I think what I would really like to do is just be able to go back in time and give myself the cheat code of saying, you don't need to worry as much. Just find the fun in what in your experience, rather than trying to find the flaws in it. And I think
enjoy where you are now. I love that.
Yeah. Again, maybe that's
no, I love it.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I think that's maybe my favorite so far. Like, just believe in yourself, you'll get there. Just calm down, breathe, basically.
And help others as much as you can. I
Right.
really sincerely think that we live in a world that is a bit that pushes us to be competitive with others, and
Right.
and I think that's one of the biggest flaws that we have in our society, is that if we could just support each other, help each other, be there for each other without the fear that others might be taking advantage of us, that it would just be the world would be a nicer place. And I don't know, maybe I'm melodramatic.
No, I 100% agree. Thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
We appreciate your time, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful one. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out Behind the Game, sponsored by Yoda One. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.